Hello and welcome to the complete guide on how to fit a Tailfin bar system to your bike. It's important to check that when it arrives you have all of the parts you require. So inside the package you should have the bar mount itself, that's 2 brackets and the lower bar and hook. The brackets themselves have the screws pre-installed, so double check that those are both in. There's the bag skin and then the bag hardware. So that's the upper X clamp and the lower anti-rotation bar, as well as a set of 4 pre-thread locked screws to fit. So obviously a full set of instructions as well, but we're going to go through all of the steps to fit this correctly to your bike. Before you start the installation, you will need a couple of tools. You'll need a standard Torx T25 and a torque wrench with a T25 bit. Then make sure that your handlebar is clamped tight in your stem and that you have enough space either side of the stem to allow you to fit the bar system clamps. The final thing to do before starting installation is to pack the bag skin. This will make installing the bag hardware a little bit easier. And then the next thing to do is to change the orientation of the hook for the TPU strap. So when it comes from the factory, it's oriented down. We need to change that 180 degrees. So pull out the strap itself, undo the Torx T25 and change from pointing down towards the back of the bag to pointing forwards. Tighten back up again. And this needs to be tightened to 3 Newton meters. Once that is nice and tight, you can thread back through and then the bag is ready to set up. First step is to install the bag hardware to the bag skin itself. Now, out of the factory, you may find that the internal aluminium frame and the bag skin do not quite line up. So it's important to be able to try and line up the holes with the skin and the frame itself. This is one of the reasons why we ask you to first of all pack the bag, and then secondly you can use the rear pocket to pull the bag skin around until you can see those holes. Once you've actually found the holes and everything looks to be lining up, then what you can do is start to install the hardware. Take the anti-rotation bar first, place on the bag skin one of the screws, and once you've found that hole, you can tighten it up. If when tightening up you feel that it goes too tight or there's too much resistance, please stop. You might not have the screw in perfect alignment. If so, you run the risk of cross-threading and damaging the internal frame. So back off and try again. Once you have one side tight, not too tight though, you can then move the other side around, make sure that everything lines up perfectly. Take your second screw, place in and tighten. Once this part is in place, you probably will find it easier to locate the holes for the X clamp. Take your X clamp, place onto the bag, take your screws and repeat. Once again, if there's any undue tension, please stop and make sure you have everything aligned. Once you have all 4 screws located, it's important then to torque up those screws to the correct tension. For all 4, it is 5 Newton meters. So take your torque wrench. This one is preset to 5 Newton meters. And repeat with the X clamp. Once the bag hardware is in place and torqued up correctly, you can set this aside because we're now going to look at the handlebar mount. Take your handlebar clamp, the 2 clamps and the mounting bar. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take out the screws that attach the handlebar clamp to your handlebars. Allow the hinge to open freely. Do the same on the second one. Once the handlebar clamps are free, if you run 35mm handlebars, you need to take out the additional adapters. These are a 2mm hex key to take out, then there are 2 per clamp. one that side and one that side. If you're running 31.8mm diameter handlebars, then keep these in place. The next thing to do is to install the lower mounting bar. This slides into the smaller hole, and then the same goes on this side. But what you want to make sure of is the two clamps, one of them has Tailfin written on it. This needs to be on the left-hand side if you're looking towards the bike. Slide them both on, and then just gently tighten them so everything stays in place. With the handlebar mounts together, you're now in a position to be able to fit into your bike. So take your handlebar mount and put over the handlebars either side of the stem. If there are any cables in the way, make sure these are out of the way so you can fit the clamps correctly. Once they're over, you're going to put the screws back in. This next step is crucial in order to install this correctly. With the clamps in place, pinch both sides together and fit the screw. That will keep everything in alignment and make it easier to tighten the screw itself. If you're tightening the screw and you feel undue tension at any point, stop, because it might not be in perfect alignment. Make sure you're still pinching that clamp together and make sure that everything feels nice and smooth as it goes in. Tighten up just a little bit so it holds in place, and then do the same for the second side. So with the handlebar mount roughly in place, the next stage is to get it in the optimum position for your bike. So make sure it can still move and everything can slide. Take your pre-packed bag, open the X-clamp, and you're going to attach the bag to the bike itself, making sure that the lower anti-rotation bar installs into the lower hook itself. Once that's in place, close the X-clamp, and then the bag itself should be free to move. The next stage is to set your bag in the optimum position for your bike. This will depend on the size of bike you have and the style of bike you have as well. On a gravel bike such as this with a rigid fork, there are two important measurements to think about. Firstly, you can bring it in close to the frame. We recommend up to about 15mm away from the frame is ideal. Secondly, and probably most important, is the clearance between the bottom of the bag and the tyre itself. For a bike with a rigid fork, we recommend at least 20mm of clearance between the bag and the tyre. If you have a mountain bike or a bike with a suspension fork, this clearance needs to be more. And it depends on how much travel you have on that front suspension fork. For example, if you have a bike with a 120mm front suspension fork, you need to have at least 140mm of clearance between the bottom of the bag and the tyre. So that's the suspension travel plus that 20mm of clearance we recommend. When setting up the optimum position, you might want to take into account personal preference as well. You may find that access to the front pockets isn't quite perfect for your own personal needs. So you can take this into account and adapt the position to suit. When you have found your optimum position, take your Torx key and just nip up all 4 of these screws to hold everything in place. The next stage is to tighten up all 4 of the screws on the handlebar clamp correctly. For these, we recommend 5 Nm, so the same as the bag hardware. You may want to take the bag off the bike just to give you better access to all of these screws and tighten them up. Finally, when everything is nice and tight, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to take the bike for a very short test ride to ensure that there is no head tube rub or no tyre interference at all. If there is, then repeat the above steps until you are happy with that final position. To accompany the bar system, we also have released a complete range of accessory mounts. These are designed to put things like your GPS device, your lights, or other accessories that would normally fit on your bars in the optimal position when you're using the new bag system. Fitting the accessory mounts to your handlebar system is very, very simple. If we start by looking at the central, so the GoPro style central mount here, you can see that this part is actually hinged. So this will fit into this central point here. Simply slide it over push in place, and then use the supplied T25 screw to tighten that in place. The side mounts, you can fit them on either side. If we put this on this side, so that end part is threaded as we said. So simply slide on and then tighten up. You can then opt to run the 22.2mm one on the other side if you want to run 3 different versions, and this will fit in exactly the same way. Both of the GoPro and the Sides 22.2 have a recessed part. That is the part that will fit into the bar itself. The fourth accessory is our computer mount. This will fit onto one of the GoPro style mounts here, and it comes with the 2 different adapters, one for Garmin computers and one for Wahoo. So the first thing you need to do before you can install is to insert the correct adapter. So you can see that there are 4 mounting holes in here, and there are 2 per adapter. Orient the adapter for the correct position for your particular GPS device, and then insert the 2 2mm hex key head screws. When that's in place, you can then choose whichever one you would prefer to put this onto. Once you have your accessories in place, you can then obviously adjust the angles to make sure that everything is in the optimum position for yourself.